Hi there, everybody. This is Convergence Training. We're here for the webinar. We see a lot of you are logged in. We're going to give just another minute before we get started so that people can straggle in. So we'll be right with you. Thanks for coming in. All right, and with that, let's get started. So hello to everybody out there and welcome. Thanks for attending this webinar. And we're going to be talking about the MSHA Part 46 training regulations. So let's get started with that. First, a couple introductions, and I'm going to ask my partner here, my presenting partner, Bjorn Ansbro, to introduce himself first. Bjorn?
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Bjorn. I am the marketing manager here at Convergence Training, and probably the main reason that I'm here helping present is part of my background at Convergence, along with Jeff, was originally in 2008 producing the set of training that was our first MSHA Part 46 specific course set. Last year, I spent quite a bit of time rewriting and updating all of that, and so I have a fair amount of experience with MSHA Part 46, with contact with MSHA personnel, people in the field, and a lot of surface miner operators and mining contractors who use the courses, have lots of questions, and so everything that we're going to talk about is really based on our experience with key questions from those people who are required to comply with that regulation. So that's why I'm here. Jeff, back to you.
All right, thanks, Bjorn. My name is Jeff Delto. I'm the Senior Learning and Development Specialist at Convergence. By trade, I'm an instructional designer, although I have a safety background of 10 years or more. Some of you might recognize me because I write the Convergence Training blog. You may, if you're a member of the American Society of Safety Engineers, you may recognize me. I write a kind of recurrent safety training column for their Professional Safety magazine. I'm also on the subcommittee with ASSE and ANSI to create an upcoming national standard on virtual safety training. That's called Z490.2. So that's who we are. And both Bjorn and I, as Bjorn mentioned, are with a company called Convergence Training. Convergence Training is a training provider. We have a specialty in safety training. We also have a specialty in mining safety training. We make learning management systems to help you administer your training, an incident management system for incident investigations. We have compatible mobile apps for all of that. We make e-learning or online courses for a lot of topics, including general safety and compliance, OSHA, and that kind of stuff, but also MSHA safety training. And we do make custom training as well. So feel free, if you have questions about that, to check out our website at convergencetraining.com or shoot off an email to the email address here, presenter@convergencetraining.com. We'll get back to you on that. Bjorn and I both worked on the creation of our MSHA safety training solutions that was released back in 2008. And those training solutions won first prize at 2008 MSHA TRAM Award, so that was nice. And those kind of awards have continued. Just this year, our MSHA safety training solutions won 2 awards. First, we won the ISHN Reader's Choice Award for Best Safety Training with our MSHA safety training solutions. And we followed that up at the ASSE Safety 2017 conference by winning their Attendee Choice Awards for Best Safety Training. So we're proud of that, and again, we encourage you to check that out. One last note, I will be presenting at the upcoming MSHA TRAM conference in October out in West Virginia. I'll be giving 2 presentations, one on current and future training technology for the mining industry, and a second on evaluating online safety training solutions. So if you're at MSHA Tram, stop by, say hi, check out the conferences if you're interested. If you're not going to be at Tram, shoot off an email to the email address here, presenter@convergencetraining.com, and I can get you the materials, my PowerPoint and so on, that we'll use at that conference. All right, a couple housekeeping things, and I'll hand it over to Bjorn. First, we have a lot to cover, so feel free to put in questions typing them in with the webinar software tool, and at any time, but we're going to address those at the end. There'll be a few polls along the way, so we'll let you know and ask you to respond to a few poll questions. That'll give us a little better idea of who you are and what kind of help you're looking for with safety training, but also we can all learn from one another. Also, after the webinar is over, when Bjorn and I say goodbye, on your screen you'll see a brief post-webinar survey. It should take 1 or 2 minutes to fill out. I think 5 questions. If you could fill that out, we'd really appreciate it. We'd learn a lot from that. A day or two from today, you'll receive from us a follow-up email with a recorded version of this webinar with the PowerPoint that we're using right now and a whole bunch of related resources. Also, if you look in the webinar tool itself, there should be a handout tab, and we have a free handout there for you. You can download now or at any time on MSHA, online MSHA compliance. And then lastly, just a quick head up, we probably will be talking about 30 minutes today, then we'll go into that Q&A session we talked about, and that'll just kind of help you anticipate what's coming next. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Bjorn, who's going to tell you all about MSHA Part 46.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you again, everyone, for coming. And just to give you a little bit of a heads up about the things that we plan to cover, we will cover MSHA Part 46, and we picked out just a few key important things, so the important stuff. The key players that MSHA specifically calls out in the regulations, those roles of people that are kind of required along the way, the main types of training that people focus on from a regulatory standpoint, compliant methods of training and evaluation, and then the types of compliant documents. There are 2 key documents that we'll go into. Some of the things that we're not going to cover are Part 48 in detail. We'll just mention it, as far as it's different from 46. Site-specific training, that's a really basic piece of Part 46 we're not really going to cover in detail. Other training for non-mining employees, new task training requirements, newly hired experience training requirements. But again, we have a lot of experience with an understanding of these types of roles and these other types of training. So if you have questions along the way, like Jeff said, feel free to email them to us. Feel free to follow up afterwards. We will be happy to connect with you, and really do want to make sure everybody gets their questions answered. Again, but this presentation is really focused on kind of that roll-up of key stuff, the common questions that people ask. One of the things you're going to see as well, something I don't like to do in presentations too much, is put a bunch of text on the screen, but in this case, because so much of it's regulatory, I've got quotes directly from 2 key documents. One is the Title 30, Part 46, that is the MSHA surface miner regulation, and you're going to see some quotes, and I'll read some of those just so it's clear that that information is coming directly from MSHA. And the other is a document that MSHA puts out, basically interpreting that regulation, that set of regulations. So they go into great detail to interpret what the regulation actually says. Both of those we provide as links at the end. Any other resources you need, let us know, again, through the questions or afterwards, and we'll get everybody taken care of. So MSHA Part 46, the important stuff. The main thing is, what is it? So in Title 30, Code of Federal Regulations, Part 46.1, MSHA defines the scope of the regulation as covering training and retraining of miners engaged in shell dredging or employed at sand, gravel, surface stone, surface clay, colloidal phosphate, or surface limestone mines. So what does that mean? That means surface mines, not underground mines. And very specifically, and this is one of the questions that we get quite a bit, it is non-metal, non-coal. So clearly there are plenty of surface-only mines that mine things like bauxite for aluminum and other minerals that are specifically related to metal. If they are, it is not Part 46, it's 48. If it's a surface strip coal mine, anything to do with coal, it's not Part 46. So once again, Part 48, A and B, we get questions, people say, hey, you know, I'm just going to the surface area of an underground mine, so I should be fine with Part 46. That's not the case. Part 48B is specifically for surface areas of underground mines. So if it is metal, coal, once again, it's 48. If it's just the surface area of an underground mine, still Part 48. And obviously, if it's underground, it's 48. So this leads us to our first poll. So we're going to shoot this out there, and you should see it come up on your screen. And we'll take a moment to give everybody a chance to answer. We'll keep an eye on how many people are answering, and should be less than a minute or so. Looks like we're almost 90%. We'll give everybody a few more seconds. I feel like we should have some music or something to help out with the dead space, but that's how webinars go. All right, we're going to close that poll. Looks like a lot of people are just brushing up, which is totally fine. That makes a lot of sense. And again, you may have more detailed questions than what we're going over here, but we're happy to help down the road or after the webinar.
Bjorn, what was the ratio of respondents on that one?
So it looks like we were at 78% said that no, they're just brushing up on the details, and 22% said, yep, never had to comply with it before.
Great, thanks.
So what we often see in those ratios, and that's why we ask the question, is a lot of times it's mining contractors who are surprised, oh, guess what, we have to do MSHA training, we've got no experience with this. So my bet is that most of those 22% who said never had to comply with it before are likely mining contractors. And again, we're happy to help with any questions that come up specifically about that as we close this out and then afterwards. So now we're going to focus on key players. The key players are three of them. There are three that show up in whether it's for whatever training role. We've got the responsible person, the competent person, and the miner, and that also includes the mining contractor. And MSHA, from a training standpoint and a regulatory standpoint, sees no difference between a miner and a mining contractor. It's a very common question that we get, but I'm just a contractor, don't I have to do less training, or is there some lighter version of all of this stuff? The answer is unfortunately no. MSHA sees miners, mining contractors exactly the same and requires the same things from them. The responsible person, MSHA defines as designated in the MSHA approved training plan. We'll go over the training plan in a little bit, for the mine as responsible for health and safety training. And this states, I certify that the above training has been completed. So that responsible person is, again, quote unquote, responsible for the health and safety and has to effectively certify on the documents that the training has been completed. The competent person is designated by the production operator or independent contractor who has the ability, training, knowledge, or experience to provide the training to miners in his or her area of expertise. the competent person must be able both to effectively communicate the training subject to minors and to evaluate whether the training given to minors is effective. We'll go into the competent person's role a little bit more as we move forward, but one of the key things that comes up time and again is about the competent person. That is not designated by MSHA, it's designated by the production operator or the independent contractor, and that's entirely your call. So it does not, for Part 46, need to be an MSHA approved trainer. MSHA puts that designation and that choice into your hands to determine who's competent to cover those subjects. The miner is any person, including any operator or supervisor, who works at the mine and who's engaged in mining operations. Now this also includes, and MSHA specifically states, this definition includes independent contractors and employees of independent contractors who are engaged in mining operations and any construction worker who's exposed to hazards of mining operations. And what we've tried to do as well is offer the specific reference in the lower right so that you can look these things up yourself. But again, if you're familiar with all of this, then you know where to find those things. That brings us to our second poll. We're moving right along. I'm going to launch that right now. You should see that on your screen. Okay, we're looking at about 80%, excuse me, 90% or so, and completed the poll, and we're about split. 33% are miners, 33% mining contractors, excuse me, 37%, and 30% other. So very, very interesting. Give you another couple of seconds here, see if we can get couple more participants to take part. All right, we'll close that out. And we'll move on to the main types of training. Main types of training are new miner, and once again, the miner and the mining contractor have equivalent requirements, and annual refresher. And once again, we know that there are other types of training associated with MSHA Part 46, but for practical purposes, what most mine operators, mining contractors focus on is new miner and annual refresher. Now, someone's going to say, oh, what about newly hired experienced miners? What we find so often is that regardless of a new employee's experience, a lot of mine companies in particular will hire and train as if they're new miners, and that just gives them the maximum amount of training. They don't have to change up their training program, and again, we'll touch on the timing and everything related to new miner and annual refresher in just a moment. So once again, the definition of a new miner is beginning employment as a miner with a production operator or independent contractor who is not an experienced miner. MSHA specifically outlines an experienced miner has completed 24 hours of new miner training and at least 12 cumulative months of surface miner experience. Now the timing of new miner very specifically laid out that 7 clearly defined subjects need to be covered at a minimum of 4 hours prior to a miner beginning work. Now those subjects include, and they are laid out in the Part 46 regulation, introduction to the mine, hazard recognition and avoidance, and we've put our spin on some of these titles, but this is the gist of what MSHA requires. Emergency medical procedures, health and safety aspects of tasks, the rights of miners, the line of authority, typically at a mine, and reporting hazards. Now MSHA says after the start of work within 60 days, respiratory device training and first aid training must take place as appropriate, and then within 90 days, all remaining of the 24-hour minimum must be completed. Now once again, most companies that we work with tend to take all of that 24 hours, split it up into 3 8-hour days, and get it done prior to the beginning of work. Annual refresher training, MSHA specifically says no less than 8 hours of annual refresher training must be provided, no later than 12 months after a miner begins work at the mine. Once again, both miner and mining contractors. Any mine contractor who is interested in keeping up to date with their MSHA compliant training, continuing work at client mines, annual refresher is a requirement. What does that timing look like? Well, after the start of work, within no later than 12 months, what MSHA lays out is a number of suggested and recommended training topics, but the one that's actually required is changes at the mine. So there's no minimum requirement specifically for covering that changes at the mine. It can be 30 minutes, an hour, 3 hours. You could spend the entire time if you wanted to, but let's say you spend 2 hours covering changes at the mine, which could be the redirecting of haul roads, the changing of an active mine area in a pit. If you're a mining contractor, it could be adding a new sprinkler system for your fire extinguishing system. It could be a newly updated emergency preparedness or evacuation plan at your office or at your facility. So very broad range of things that can be covered at the quote-unquote changes at the mine, but that has to be covered. And any remaining training of that minimum 8 hours can be pretty much anything that MSHA either suggests or recommends, or it could be filled in with your own training as long as you identify that in the training plan. And we're going to cover that in just a moment. So our third poll, racing quite right along. We're going to launch that right now. So if everybody takes a moment, and I'll keep you updated on where we are with that in just a second. Looks like we're at about 65% of people responding, and so far 15% are focused on new miner, 30% annual refresher, and then 55% both, which again is not uncommon. All right, a couple more seconds here to give everybody an opportunity to respond. All right, we're going to close that out and race right along. Those percentages are about the same. All right, thanks everybody. Moving along, we're going to cover some compliant methods of training and evaluation, and this comes up quite a bit. Everyone may be aware that Convergence does produce computer-based training software, e-learning, things like that, and the use of that computer-based training from a regulatory standpoint comes up as a question quite a bit. So we'll cover what MSHA deems methods of training and evaluation that are okay in their eyes, that are compliant. As usual, classroom training, other in-person training, very, very common. A lot of you may either be trainers or people who've taken training. Not uncommon at all for there to be a training room at your facility. Observed in the field, this can be on the job, very straightforward. As long as it's outlined in the training plan that this type of training method is going to be used, totally fine. Computer-based training, of course, MSHA specifically says that they consider computer-based training or other interactive training technologies to be training methods to be used by a competent person effectively and appropriately. This would not necessarily require that the competent person be in the room at all times. However, the competent person must be available to evaluate the trainee's progress and to answer questions as they arise. Again, this is from MSHA's own interpretation document. So one of the things that comes up again as a question and is very specifically laid out here is we'll have customers now and then who purchase the online training, take it and say, okay, where's my 5023? Where's my record of training? I thought you guys were going to send it to me signed. That does not happen this way, and MSHA specifically defines computer-based training to be used as a method and puts the control of all of that documentation and delivery and oversight in the hands of the competent person and the responsible person. So when you take a computer-based training, whether it's from us or anybody else, it is considered a training method, just like your competent person would have told you to go study a book. It is a method. So as long as that's laid out, again, in the training plan, used as a method, and then all the documentation is then administered, signed, and controlled by your organization, that's how MSHA has designed the training. It's not just us or anybody else saying, no, we're not going to sign. It's not designed for us to do that as the provider of a training method. Hope that's clear. If you have any questions, again, we can help clarify that. So once again, training evaluation is any method that MSHA offers the mine and the mining contractor to select a method that will best determine if the training has been effective. Possible evaluation methods include administering written or oral tests or demonstration by the miner that he or she can perform all required duties or tasks in a safe and healthful manner. In addition, periodic work observations can be used to identify areas where additional training may be needed, and such observations along with feedback from the miners could be used to modify or enhance the training program. Now once again, this piece really highlights that MSHA offers a very broad latitude for the methods of training. The real key as far as methods is that they should be written out in the training plan before the training is done. So again, we'll cover where that falls in the document in just a moment. Brings us to our fourth poll, and again, thanks for everybody participating so nicely. We really appreciate the feedback. We're going to launch that right now. So you should see that come up, and we'll look forward to everyone's feedback. So we're at about 75% of respondents, and it looks like 60% have used classroom, 52% computer-based, 36% in the field, and 20% say they've had some other experience with other types of training. So we'll offer about 10 more seconds here. All right, we'll close that up and we'll move on to the types of compliant documents. There are two main documents. The training plan, which again has to be written when MSHA wants to review your documents. They're not interested in going to a computer. If somebody shows up, an MSHA inspector, they want to see things printed out. So when I'm talking about any of these documents, they're all going to be printed out, filed, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail about each. So the training plan is one. That's before you do the training. And then the record or certificate of training. So we look at this as kind of that document sandwich, the training plan to begin with, the record of training at the end, and then the training that happens in the middle. The training plan is typically going to be multiple pages, with a lot of information on it. You'll see that this one is specifically focused on new miner. There will be, the expectation is that there's a training plan for each of the different training types. Now that training plan has to clearly state an estimated amount of hours of training. Now MSHA does not say it has to be in a specific increment, but they provide a lot of leeway. So you'll see here our example could be anything from half an hour to an hour and a half, 2 hours to 6 hours. It really is an estimate, can be just about anything. The subject matter as defined by MSHA and any additional topics that you want to include, the objectives of the training, the teaching methods as we talked about a little bit, the course material, this is how those teaching methods will be implemented, the evaluation methods that we talked about again, and then every training plan has to have a cover. What you're looking at on the screen right now is our template that we provide, and that template is built based on MSHA documents. So everything that we provide is compliant to MSHA specifications. The types of records or certificates, you may all be familiar with the 5023. This is the document provided by MSHA, and just so you know, it's going to be a little bit different from another MSHA compliant training record. And what's interesting about the 5023 is that it was originally designed for Part 48. So while it is often used and certainly acceptable by MSHA for Part 46, it is slightly different than even the regulations that MSHA outlines, the 5 key topics that are required for MSHA's compliant document for Part 46. So we'll go through those in detail in just a second. And so again, the 2 records are the 5023 and the MSHA compliant document. And again, we'll go through the details on what the differences really are. The 5023 needs to have the training name, and again, you're going to see those individual key players show up again. The initials of the competent person with the date and the task, the name of the mine MSHA ID location, and then 2 things that are associated with the responsible person. There's a statement where they are clearly saying, hey, I understand the ramifications of creating a false certification. I'm certifying that all of this is true. And again, that's the responsible person signing. So the question again, just to reinforce that, is that it's not the trainer in this case, it's the responsible person. It's not the competent person, the responsible person. Now, MSHA in Part 46 specifically lays out what is acceptable, or what they refer to as, if a document has these elements, it is deemed compliant by MSHA. It does not have to be submitted to MSHA. It doesn't have to be seen by an inspector or approved by MSHA at all. It can be set up by you. It can be set up by us. These are documents that we create as templates and provide to and have provided to thousands of customers who use this to comply and to present to MSHA. So this document has to have, again, the trainee name, the name of the competent person, and this is not just our version that's different. These are the specific requirements outlined in MSHA Part 46. The name of the competent person with the training type, duration, and date, the name of the MSHA ID, the name of the mine, MSHA ID, and the location. And then once again, those 2 pieces of 2 items associated with the responsible person, that understanding of the false certification, and then their signature. So we're down to our last poll. Thank you again for everybody sticking with us. We're going to launch that right now, and you should see that come up on your screen. Oh, you guys are getting quite a bit faster on your responses. We're at about 80% now. And the question about, were you aware that you can create your own compliant? Looks like most of you were. About 70% say yes, you were aware of that. 32% said no at the moment. So we'll give everybody a few more seconds. We're at about 83% of respondents. All right, we'll close that out. And just a review of some of the things that we've hoped that you've learned. We covered MSHA, what we think are the really important things, that important distinction between MSHA Part 46 and 48, the three key players that come up time and again in the regulation, those two main types of training that, again, for practical purposes, that's what most people focus on in the field, the compliant methods of training and evaluation, and the types of compliant documents. The documentation is one that just comes up time and time again, and please, again, do not hesitate to ask us detailed questions about the documentations, anything we have covered or haven't covered. And at this point, I'm going to say thank you once again, and I'm going to hand everything back over to Jeff, and he'll wrap things up.
All right, thank you very much, Bjorn. Just a few resources for you all before we get into the Q&A session and then into our little survey at the end. We mentioned in a day or two you'll get an email from us. It will include this PowerPoint, and you can go into this PowerPoint, and Bjorn has wrangled up some helpful links for you here to MSHA websites and similar places where you can find information. In addition, we talked about new minor and annual refresher training and mentioned we're not going to talk about a whole bunch of other stuff. But we don't want to leave you high and dry on that. So again, in this PowerPoint, you see we have links to a whole bunch of articles at the Convergence Training blog on a lot of that other stuff we didn't talk about, including even free training materials you can use. So keep your eyes out for that. A reminder again, I'll be speaking at the upcoming MSHA TRAM conference, and really just a reminder of the conference in general. If you haven't been there, it's a really helpful conference. It's free once you're there. It's October 10 to 12 in Beaver, West Virginia. I'll be talking on two different topics. The first is kind of current and future training technologies for the mining and mining safety industries. And the second will be how to evaluate an online safety training solution, and I'll be looking at courses, management systems, and providers. So if you're there, great, come on by. Otherwise, shoot us an email and I can get you these materials, the presentation materials. And we're going to start by taking questions at this point. And Bjorn, we did have one roll in. You've addressed it a little bit already, but I want to go back to it, and this will give people an opportunity to type in any more questions. Blair said, here's his initial question. A state Montana safety inspector has commented to us that online safety training will not be accepted. Is that true? So I know you addressed, and if you could answer initially the answer from MSHA, and then we can hopefully tease out, Blair's talking about a state safety inspector, so I don't know if that's someone with MSHA or not, but if you could answer for MSHA first, that'd be great.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Blair, for the question. My understanding is that even on a state level, the MSHA personnel are still federal employees and adhere to the federal standards. Now, there may be other state overriding regulations as far as what the state will accept in certain areas, but this is something that that, as far as I understand, that even on a state level, that's still a federal regulation that MSHA itself, again, that doesn't necessarily operate on a state level, even though there are people stationed at the state level, that computer-based training is very, very specifically allowed at, via MSHA. So one of the things that that is a caveat as far as the documentation of anything that you do, and this is more specific to contractors, is that in the end, it's not even the federal or the state that that has the final say. It really is the mine. The mine operator can set their own standards as long as they are at or above the MSHA standards for what they will accept or how they use or apply the training. So they could say at a mine level, hey, we have specific requirements for documentation or training, and that's why one of the things that we really encourage for mining contractors is that if you know you're going to be working at a mine, certainly go through the regulation, make sure you understand that. You're welcome to talk to us. We'll do our very best to answer your questions at any time, but develop a relationship with the mine so that no matter what, you don't end up at the gate with a document or with an amount of training that they may not accept. So develop your relationship with the mine, find out what they will accept, and go from there. But again, my understanding is that that state inspector, again, you know, I've ended up on the phone with a number of MSHA personnel and clients and gone through these types of things, that it does not sound accurate that computer-based training would not be accepted.
And Bjorn, what you just said there, and what you referred to a document from MSHA, and in this PowerPoint, we'll get this PowerPoint to Blair and everybody else, and Blair could direct that inspector to the MSHA statement. But what you just said is completely in line with conversations I've had with the Director of Education and Training at MSHA, Jeff Duncan, which is again one of the related resources in this PowerPoint as well. We do have a second question here. Can the mine site safety manager be both the responsible and the competent person on the 5023?
The short answer is yes. And that question comes up actually more often with mining contractors. For example, MSHA understands that there are vastly different sizes of companies, vastly different sizes of organizations, all the way from, you know, even a good size mine outfit may be relatively lightly staffed, or let's say 20 people on site. Those responsible person, the competent person can be the same person, absolutely. And MSHA, again, with regard to contractors, they understand that, you know, I've had personal contact with a number of contractors who are sole proprietors. So they have a welding company, an electrical contractor company, and it's just one person. MSHA allows for the responsible person, the competent person, and the trainee, that miner, to be all the same person. And I know it sounds counterintuitive, but MSHA allows for an individual to oversee their own training and sign off on their own training. Because in the end, when MSHA says, let's see those documents, and you say, hey, here they are, I've got them printed out, I'm a sole proprietor, that responsibility is entirely up to you. So MSHA knows that, they're aware that there are one-man shows out there, and that they allow for those things to be, for those roles to roll up as one person.
All right, great, Bjorn, thank you. So that question was from Monty, and Monty has a second question as well. And I just want Monty to know, let us know if we didn't answer the question. Also, Jim, we see your question will be with you shortly too. Monty's second question, and one I can't remember the answer to, Bjorn, I bet you know it. How many years can an experienced miner go by without working before he or she is required to start over with a new set of 24-hour training?
That has come up. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer. I can't recall that there is a specific that MSHA addresses that in Part 46. They may address something along those lines in their interpretation document, but I definitely would have to do some digging there. Again, not the first time that's come up, but it's not a super common question. What I can tell you is that in most cases, let's say you're an experienced miner, you haven't worked as a miner for 3 or 4 years or so. The likelihood, and this is from our experience with mining operators, is that when you get hired, they're just going to give you the 24-hour training as a new miner. So that's one of those areas that typically falls back to the discretion of the mine operator or mining contractor, but in this case, mostly the mine operators deal with, you know, newly hired, experienced miners. So again, what the regulation is, I'll be happy to do some follow-up and see if I can find anything specific, some specific verbiage. But the practical answer is that you're probably going to end up hired and trained as a new miner with a minimum of 24 hours.
All right, thanks, Bjorn. So Monty, we'll get back to you. For everybody, in addition, we're happy you're asking us questions, but feel free to contact the MSHA district office for questions like that too, so you're getting the answer straight from the horse's mouth. Next question by Jim and Lori, just to let you know, we see you out there as well. Jim's question is, let me see if I have this right. Okay, a contractor comes to a mine. They have completed a web-based course. They need to have proof of new miner training record. Is it the contractor's responsibility on their training plan, or is the company's training plan requirements?
I would, if I had the opportunity to speak with Jim directly, I'd say let's clarify the company. I'm assuming that it's the, when you say, is it the contractor's responsibility on the training plan or the company's training plan requirements? Jeff, do you understand exactly what he's asking there? I'm not 100% sure.
Jim says,
I'm not sure if the, go ahead.
He responded back and he said correct. Jim, could we ask you just to restate the question one more time? Just type it in, and we'll go to Lori, and then we'll cycle back to Jim, and hopefully we can hammer this out on the webinar. But if not, we can touch base with Jim after the webinar as well.
I can do something real quick. I'll answer what I think, and then we can go to Lori, and then if Jim needs clarification, happy to do it.
Yeah.
Once again, the tricky area about contractors doing training at all and then showing up, let's say sight unseen, at a mine operation, is that that discretion to allow entry onto the mine, with the exception of law enforcement or MSHA inspection, that is entirely up to the mine. So a mine operator could deny entry to a contractor virtually for any reason that they deem, suitable to them. So it could be documentation, it could be, it could be just about anything. That's why we encourage contractors to develop those relationships, get a heads up from the people, from the authority at the mine, so that no one's held up at the gate. And that's, that encouragement has really paid off in a lot of ways, because we get feedback like, oh, I'm so glad that we did that, because now we know exactly not just what's covered by, what's required by MSHA, but what is required by that particular mine and what they want to see when we show up. So everybody's good. But ultimately, the signing of that new miner training record, if you're a mining contractor, that record has to be signed by the responsible person at your company. Now, in some cases, we've had lots of contractors say, well, the mine operation allowed us to come and sit in on their training, so they actually trained us. That's great. That person responsible for the health and safety of the workers for your company is likely still an employee of your company. Now, the competent person overseeing the training could be an employee, it could be somebody that you've hired, and it could be somebody at that mine if you're a contractor and going to take the training at the mine. But the responsible person who signs the training is going to be typically that person at your organization who is responsible for your health and safety. And there's a lot of confusion, and I promise you, lots of companies have the trainer sign the document, and MSHA probably signs off on that. Okay, that's fine. But nowhere in the regulation does it say that's okay, even though that's probably done quite a bit. But it is, again, in both the 5023, the MSHA compliant document, again, the one that we provide as well, that signature has to be the responsible person, and it's defined at your organization. So hopefully that helps.
Bjorn, I got one clarification from Jim. I'll read his clarification, and either we'll get it right, or we'll get Jim offline. So he clarified. Here's what he wrote. MSHA is on site. They asked to see the records. And then I think this is supposed to be a question.
Yeah.
Contractor is responsible, or company they are working for is responsible? So who's responsible according to the different training plans?
And I'm holding my breath as that's a really good question. We haven't had that exact question yet, as far as, just like you're saying, that scenario where MSHA shows up, and let's say you've got a dozen mine employees on the site and 3 mining contractors. And MSHA says, let's see everybody's papers. My logic would be that just like the mining contractor would have shown the mine operator their own records, those records are not shared, documents by the mining operator and the mine contractor. Ultimately, the ownership of those documents reside within those organizations. So my assumption, again, this is relatively educated assumption without knowing for sure, and there's one caveat I'll throw in, is that the contractor has to have their own documents and the mine employees have to have their own documents. Now, the one caveat is that we have heard time and time again that MSHA inspectors may have their own interpretations of some of this stuff, and it becomes, if there is a documented violation of some sort, we've had many mine operators who come back and say we've had to contest and go back to the regulations and contest the violation that we were cited with. So that's the one caveat, is that I can say, okay, based on my understanding of how MSHA lays out the regulation and the ownership and responsibility of the documents, and how I think that should happen in that scenario, every inspector is different, and that's what we hear time and again. So my suggestion would be just to make sure that if you're a mining contractor, absolutely make sure that everybody is armed with their documents while they're on a site performing work, and then you've got something to refer back to.
All right, Bjorn, that sounds like a good answer. Jim, hopefully that answers your question. If not, let us know. We'll get touch base with you offline, and we'll move forward. And feel free to contact, as Bjorn mentioned, that MSHA district office is a great resource. Lori's got a question here. Does it matter if a miner's 8 hours of training is all on the same topic? Example, health and safety, etc. And Jim said thanks. Sounds like we answered the question.
Okay, great. And Jim, just real quick back to Jim. I'm not exaggerating in the slightest that when I have gotten on the phone with and a conference call with an MSHA inspector or representative and with a client who's using our training, whether it's a training issue, the documentation, or any other question, and we've all sat together and worked through and developed a shared understanding of things. So ultimately, if it gets to something like that, just know that that's the extent to which we'll go to help and make sure that everybody ends up with the same, with a shared understanding and with accurate information at the end of the day. So, Lori.
Yeah. Does it matter? Oh, go ahead, Bjorn, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Does it matter if it's all on the same topic? So I'm going to assume the 8 hours is the 8-hour annual refresher, because that's the only 8-hour that's designated, 8-hour training that's designated by MSHA. And it's fine if that topic is specifically related to changes at the mine, and if that's in the training plan. If you say we're going to cover 8 hours on changes at the mine, and again, changes at the mine in MSHA's vernacular related to contractors is also changes at the contractor's location, at the contractor's offices, the contractor's warehouse. And I know that sounds a little bit odd, but that's how MSHA interprets that. As long as it's about that one required topic for the 8-hour annual refresher, which is changes at the mine, conceivably that would be okay. But if you provide, let's say, 8 hours of first aid training, CPR, covering AED, you've got some automatic external defibrillators. If it's just that, and you haven't stated on the training plan that those things are associated with changes at the mine, and on the record of training that it's not clear that those things are associated with changes at the mine. For example, if your organization just implemented a new first aid program with new first aid equipment including new AEDs at specific placements around the site. That's something that you could clearly say, that's a change within the past 12 months that affects the health and safety of everybody on site. We're going to train on that, and that counts for our 8-hour refresher training. That's totally within bounds. But it can't be just health and safety topics if you're not aligning that with the one required topic, again, which is changes at the mine. If it's a new program, new equipment, or things like that, that's health and safety related, as long as you align them, you're good.
All right. And that, Lori, let us know if that answered your question or if you still have other questions. Looks like Jim is good. Anybody else has a question? Lori's saying great and thumbs up. Thank you. Thank you, Lori.
Yep, thank you.
We'll take a minute here, see if there's any other questions. And Bjorn, I think we're good. So if anybody has, if a question comes to you in the next couple minutes or next couple days, you've got our email. We're happy to take those as well. And Bjorn, why don't we go ahead and move forward here?
Sounds good. All right, everybody, thank you so much. We're going to close this out. We really appreciate your time and the great feedback and questions. And hopefully you realize this isn't, an end to our presence here as a training provider, as as someone who operates in the MSHA and mining and contractor industry. We deal with this all the time, and we work with mining contractors and mines to help them get the right information really daily. So please feel free to continue the relationship, get back to us with any questions or help that you need, and we'll be happy to do everything we can.
And just a few ways to do that. Again, we have this presenter@convergencetraining.com email in the bottom corner. Feel free to ping us anytime. You're welcome to check out our website, convergencetraining.com. You can also check out our blog while there. There are various ways to contact us there as well. And Bjorn, is there a reminder about the MSHA TRAM conference next here?
There isn't. That was a
Okay.
couple of slides ago, but you feel free to throw that in there as well.
That's good. So hopefully we'll see you at TRAM. Otherwise, thank you very much for coming in, and see you again soon.
Yep. And from Convergence, stay safe. Thanks so much, everybody. All right. Have a great day.